welcome back to the next episode of Powered by Instinct. And normally we only have one guest on, but luckily we have two guests on this time, and they are from the amazing Digital Growth Institute. So we're joined by the founder, James Robert, and by Audrey, who has a really interesting backstory. And so we're going to jump into that later on in the conversation. But welcome to both of you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So, like I said, right, Audrey has a really cool backstory. But before we get into that, either one of you, can you tell us just a little bit more about Digital Growth Institute and what it is that y'all do?
Sure thing, Eric. So we inspire human transformation for marketing and sales teams at financial brands. And we do this so that they can confidently level up their loan and deposit growth. And the reason that I highlight human transformation is a lot of times the conversation around digital transformation within banks and credit unions leads the way. But we know that technology can only do so much. At the end of the day, it's the people who have to deploy that technology. And this is where our collaboration and the work that we're doing with Colby through Audrey is providing new insights through research, but also then providing accountability through coaching that helps people make the needed changes and transformations to level up their loans and deposits.
And I'm guessing, working in the financial slash banking sector, that they're really quick to adopt new technologies and really take some huge risks, right?
Lightning speed. No, it's an interesting opportunity, particularly when we're dealing with the human element. If you think about technology is continuing to move at an exponential rate, we as human beings tend to be linear thinkers. And so when you have technology going exponentially and you have people thinking linearly, it's creating this gap. And it's within the gap that people feel confused, they feel conflicted. And when they're in that continuous state, that's where the chaos sets in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, we're gonna jump into a little bit of that when we talk about how both of you work with your clients. But just quick reminder. So, right, we're on the Powered by Instinct podcast, and I forgot to tell everybody what all of our MOs are. So I'm Eric again. I'm a 5392. And then I have my handy little cheat sheet here. So James Robert, you're at 3294. And then Audrey, you're a 6734, right?
Yes, correct.
So Audrey, we haven't heard from you yet. So if you had to pick one area of your life where your MO has come in the most handy, where do you think that would be?
That is a great question. I guess either personally or professionally.
Yeah, the world is your oyster, whatever works for you.
I would say, well, this actually probably applies personally and professionally. It has really given me this just new sense of confidence in who I am. I think, especially when I transitioned from professions, I was a little unsure about things. I didn't quite know what my strengths were. And finding out my MO really just solidified that, I am who I am. I do bring a lot of value, even though I'm different than other people. So for me, confidence is everything. I mean, that right there, when you have confidence and you gain that confidence, that just opens the door for so many other opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, when you made that career transition prior to joining, you were a teacher, right?
Yes, I was a teacher for 7 years. I actually was with DGI back before, right out of college. And then I left to go teach for 7 years. And then I came back for, we call it tour number two.
And so were you teaching elementary school kids, high school kids, middle school?
So I was a fourth grade reading and writing and social studies teacher the entire 7 years. So for me and my MO, that was actually a really great thing because I was able to really refine my plans and systematize things and make things repeatable over the years. I wasn't forced into a lot of different changes with subjects and grade levels. So I was fortunate in that area.
And so, right, you're being that 7 in follow through, you just mentioned it, right? You created those systems, you had those repeatable processes. So what
Yes.
was the reason for making the shift and going back for your second tour?
So for me as a teacher, I think when I went into teaching, you have these certain expectations. You have this perception of what teaching is going to be like. My mom was a teacher. I really enjoyed school growing up. I had a great experience. And so I just assumed that this would be a great career for me. And it was for many years. I really enjoyed it. I had a Pinterest classroom. It was organized and systematized. But the reality of the situation is you're in an environment that is extremely unpredictable. You've got 20 to 25 students in your classroom with different learning disabilities, behavior issues, maybe English language learners. And then on top of that, all their different personalities. And every single day is different. You know, you walk in there with these amazing plans and you have to be ready to pivot and change. You know, simple things like a fire drill could derail your day because you got to stop. The kids are, you know, they get off track and then you have to come back and decide, okay, we lost 45 minutes. Now what do we do? Do we continue the lesson? Do we change and go teach something else? And so every single day is something different. You know, you've got students who might blurt out something inappropriate in the middle of the class. And you have to immediately decide how you're going to react and respond and address the students. So all of this unpredictability and kind of organized chaos, if you will, ended up leaving me just really drained. By end of year 6 and beginning of year 7, I was pretty much spent. I had 2 little kids at home and I would come home, you know, put them to bed, and I'd be asleep by 9 o'clock because I knew I needed every bit of energy to get through the next day. And so it was right in the beginning of 2020 that I reached out to James Roberts. You know, we've been connected over the years, and he had actually told me right after leaving, just, you know, keep in touch if I ever left the profession. And so I took him up on that. And, you know, at the time, I wasn't necessarily expecting to come back to DGI, but I knew that James Robert was someone that I looked up to for his expertise. And I trusted him to kind of guide me through this next chapter of my life. And so, yeah, we chatted a few times, and I guess serendipity happened. And here I am. He, you know, ended up expressing some of his needs at the time, and he might, you know, can be able to elaborate that on a little bit more, but it was like a perfect little fit.
Yeah, James Robert, go ahead if you want to throw something in about how it all
It,
came back together.
it was the story archetype of voyage and return. Audrey, she left, she learned, and she came back with a whole new perspective, a lot of wisdom, but at the same time, I was also growing as well. In 2017, I had joined Strategic Coach and went through the Colby method there, and quickly realized as a 3294 what gave me a tremendous amount of energy and what would just drain me on a day in and day out basis. And a lot of it was around the area of operations and follow through. As a 2 resistant follow through, I can know I could do that work, absolutely, but it's probably going to make me a little grumpy. I would rather be working in my 9 quick start and making things up and leading and facilitating the work that I do with clients on a day in and day out basis, particularly as I'm complementary to those in the financial services space, which I think we can loop back on here in a bit. But when I was talking with Audrey, I said, I need someone who can help me make things real. And so we went through the Colby process with her, and it
That's right.
just so happened that she was the who to my how, thinking about the who not how method with Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, a great book. And I said, "Hey, would you want to come back for a second tour?" And she said, "Yeah." And now we've continuously have been reinventing and envisioning what the Digital Growth Institute is and what it can become now when we're working within, me making things up, she's helping to make things real, and then go find people to help make that repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing once you find that right person, that complement, how much easier everything is and how much more productive you can be. Because, James Robert, you and I in a room together, we can come up with ideas to solve all the world's problems, but then somebody has to go do that stuff because that's really not our wheelhouse, right? So then we need to go find an Audrey, go find somebody like that to go and make it happen. So I know that Audrey, you went to our 1 day course, Colby Plus. What was your biggest aha or takeaway from that?
So I will always remember this workshop because it gave me such a sense of like clarity and confidence in the decision to change careers. Because I'll be honest with you, I suffered a little bit of guilt leaving teaching. And it was also coincidentally during the pandemic when a lot of other teachers were leaving too. And so I kind of felt like I was giving up on the kids, like I couldn't hack it, And so I struggled with that a lot. And when I sat in that, and I already had my Colby done before this workshop, but we dug so much deeper here. And when I heard And we talked a lot about my resistance and quick start. When I started to see that a lot of these things that I perceived as weaknesses or things that I lacked were actually strengths, that, initially started making me feel a little bit more confident. But it wasn't until we dug into the idea of energy and draining energy and kind of talking about different scenarios, that's when the light bulb went off. And I thought, oh my gosh, my Colby score, my resistant quick start is the reason I was so drained as a teacher every single day. It made perfect sense to me, and it made me feel validated that I was on the right path. I was working in my unique ability and doing things here that I, could create value for. And the classroom just wasn't for me, and that's okay. It's all good. It was a great learning experience, but I just will always remember the goosebumps I felt when I finally had that sense of relief that, okay, this is just who I am. This is how I operate. And I'm in a really great place to show those strengths.
Yeah, and as you're working with people that have vastly different MOs, 'cause you two aren't an exact 180, but you're pretty close, right? And if it works right, you become the dynamic duo. You become Batman and Robin. But there's always some speed bumps, some bruised knees, and that sort of thing along the way. You guys have any stories about maybe rubbing each other the wrong way, or maybe not appreciating each other's MOs a little bit?
I would say it's a matter of awareness. First and
Yes.
foremost of who I am and who she is. And that awareness leads to what we call the pyramid of human relationship. At the pyramid, at the foundation of every positive relationship is respect. And understanding her MO and understanding mine, I would say it has allowed and created a tremendous amount of respect for one another. Not saying that I don't annoy her and she doesn't annoy me, but it's understanding where that annoyance is coming from is typically in a different of not thinking, but just a different of the way that we're naturally operating. But we're very quickly aware of like, okay, I need to provide her with more clarity or give her some more space to build something out where she understands that I'm probably just quick starting on some things and she can just take a lot of notes and maybe one out of 100 of those ideas will actually be worth talking about down the road.
Yeah, and
Yeah. I mean, just
as a fellow 3 in follow through, whenever I'm working with a 7 through 10 in follow through, I always tell them like I'm not following your plan because I'm trying to mess with you.
mhm.
Right? It's just I operate in a different way, and I think if we can, as you mentioned, right, have that understanding about each other, it definitely makes it go a little bit smoother. And I think Audrey, you were gonna jump in there too.
Yeah, I was just going to say that allows us to be just really radically honest and transparent with each other. We're able to say, hey, look, my energy, I'm spent today. And I was telling you this, Eric, before we hit record, that after we do this, like this podcast right now, this is going to use up all my quick start energy for the day for the most part. And, fortunately, the rest of my day today is a lot more systems and operations. And so we're great. But I could tell that to James Robert and vice versa. He can tell me, Audrey, I am spent. Can we like pause on this meeting or can we adjust our plans? And we know that it's not that either one of us are lacking, drive or initiative. It's just mental and physical, and that's okay. And so that has helped us in our communication, I think, tremendously.
I want to give a very practical example here. You brought this up in my mind, Audrey, was and this is from both sides. This is from, my MO to your MO. So I wrote a book, Eric, that was scheduled to be published in April of 2020. And we all know what happened around that time period in hindsight. But all of the conferences that I was supposed to be going to speak at to do a launch tour, they all literally got shut down within 2 to 3 weeks. And so I spent maybe a day or two in the gap griping about problems. And then my wife was like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And as the 9 quick start, I just figured I'll just solve the problem by doing something. And so that's what launched the Banking on Digital Growth podcast, which has become a top 5% global podcast. So in hindsight, I'm very grateful for the experience. Now, I'm always looking for ways to improve and optimize. And so we were getting close to about 300 episodes in, and it had always been my goal to once we got to around episode 300, we would bring video into the narrative. And so I vividly remember one day we were having a meeting, Audrey and I had done some very high level, 3 fact finding research on possible optimization opportunities. And I literally just did a download. I was like, well, we could do this and we could do this and we could do this and we could do this. And here's the technology and the platforms and blah, blah, blah. And like just 100% energy, like very excited about the possibilities. I remember Audrey basically just like, I'm drained. I'm done. I can't take anymore.
Because I'm thinking
And it was
how the
like,
whole time. How?
and it was 100% respect though. Like I understood where she was coming from. She understood where I was coming from, and we were able to just walk away, give her some time to do some more fact finding and digest and come back with a proposed how a system, a methodology to follow through and build that next iteration. And that has now allowed us to what is to bring video capability into our larger podcast content engine.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Again, it's understanding each other's differences. And look, we're all still going to be ourselves, right? And so sometimes you can't help it. It's got to come out. But if you know, hey, when this comes out, I'm really draining the other person, cut them some slack, let them go take a breather, recharge their batteries, then come back. And yeah, if you do that, it can definitely be some magic. But I know it's
Yeah.
not just the two of you that work together, right? You have some other team members as well. So how do you work together as a team? How does everyone leverage everyone else's strengths on the team?
Well, you have the internal team, so understanding how they're initiating action. But I would say, Audrey, I think something too that we have found a lot of value is through the clients that we work with, because we've built this not just into our own internal methodology and almost like I call it the gift of Colby. It's giving the banks and credit unions that we work with that gift of awareness and respect within their internal teams. And I mean, you've matched some patterns. This is the pattern matching that we've been able to do to provide better experiences, understanding, particularly for me. I'm almost the exact opposite. You talked about the 180,
Yeah.
Eric. I'm the exact opposite of the MO of bank and credit union leaders. But
Yeah.
Audrey has been able to provide some clarity, and really it's a multiplier of perspectives. You want to speak to that, Audrey? Because I think to me this was the biggest, once again, another aha breakthrough moment, that it's not technology driven. I say it's the technology up here that sits between your ears.
Yeah. So we Colby every single person, every single member that we have. And sometimes it's, smaller teams, 6, 7, and sometimes it's organizations of 30 to 40. And, we have found a pretty similar pattern across the board is most of these in our program are initiating fact finders or possibly initiating follow through. Very, very light on initiating quick start. And so that alone is going to create a little bit of friction. We mentioned earlier talking about technology and innovation and moving forward. That is why we kind of see this hesitation, this lack of forward progress. And so when we're able to bring this awareness out there and help people to realize, okay, this is why. That's great. That's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with your MO at all. But let's see how there's this missing area here and that's usually where we come in. James Robert comes in and plays the role of that initiating quick start to help generate ideas and keep things moving. But I think it's just been a really great level of awareness, and really as a team on small team dynamics. I have had many conversations with people, mainly the team leads, who come to me and say, I'm having this issue or this situation, or I'm feeling friction with this other team member. And we'll unpack it. And more often than not, it has to do with their MO. And so that alone helps depersonalize things. I'm able to give them a strategy moving forward. And it's just really helped that overall team dynamic.
I want to
Go
hop in
ahead.
real fast on this because I think it's another very practical example and story. And maybe Audrey, you could add to this because you saw this unfolding, and this would have never have been possible had we not Colby'd this team. And it was a team of about 30 people, but we were working with a smaller subset of this larger team. And it was all senior leadership, including the CEO. And we were going through, we did some diagnostic work. We were providing them with a strategy to go forward and to execute and implement against. And we were maybe, I don't know, Audrey, what, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes max into a full day session with this senior leadership team. And the CEO of this organization just very bluntly said, I can't do this. Like, I just can't keep going. And we paused, and understanding his MO allowed me to meet him where he was at very empathetically, because it was going too far too fast for him. And I think, Audrey, you saw a transformation happen, though, because we were able to use this insight to
Yep.
provide a different path forward, a slower path forward that made him
Yep.
feel that much better.
Yeah, absolutely. So instead of trying to deliver all of this in one sitting, many, many, many pages long, we chunked it up and we broke it up. We created this repeatable pattern with him, this kind of regular meeting cadence where we could just give him all this information in bite-sized chunks and not have him feel so overwhelmed. Because basically what we were doing in hindsight was we were diagnosing their situation, and instead of maybe tackling one thing at a time, we kind of laid it all out there at first. And so I think that just was very, very overwhelming for him. And yeah, he reacted a little defensively, if I'm being quite honest. But we realized that it wasn't personal. It's just he needed a different way of receiving this information.
And a lot of that too was based upon past experiences. He had bad negative experiences like this before, that he was bringing the past into the present. And but understanding his MO, it was a complete transformation for me to be able to understand that A, it wasn't personal, but to say, this is where we can take, and we stepped out, we did a one-on-one, we sidebarred on this, and we said, we're gonna pause today, let's come back, let's reconvene, and we're gonna go slower. And that made him feel that much better. And this particular organization has increased by about, I would say, 35% in assets over the last 2 years. And it has just been an amazing transformational story, not from technology per se, but of human transformation that has then allowed them to adopt some new technologies going forward.
Yeah, and any type of organization you work with. So at Colby, we work with essentially every industry, right? From construction to skilled trades, to work with physicians, financial services, and everywhere in between. Regardless of what the organization does, the magic is the people,
Yeah.
right? Because they all have that secret sauce that's inside of them. And if we can figure out how do we let you unleash that, how do we let you use your secret sauce all the time, that's when you see that 30, 35% growth in just a couple of years that they probably weren't experiencing before.
Exactly.
So we talked a little bit about, how you use Colby with your clients. Tell us a little bit more just about, kind of broadly speaking, how DGI works with their clients and what are some of the things that you do.
So at a very high level, we work them through the banking on growth, banking on digital growth method, and it has four distinct steps. The step number one is to help the unaware become aware that there's some type of an issue at hand. And we do that through secret shopping their websites. And that's where they learn where they're losing literally millions in loans and deposits. It takes about 30 days to work them through this. The second, though, is so there's awareness that there's some problem. Step number two is where we host a team alignment workshop. And that's where we are ensuring that everyone is speaking the same language, that they're on the same page, so that they're able to start moving forward together in a unified direction. From there, we help guide them through a strategic process to where they get their digital growth blueprint, their strategy. It looks for gaps in growth opportunities and then provides them with a plan forward. And then finally, we help them to implement that plan to build a digital growth engine to provide ongoing accountability through coaching on a 90-day cycle. And it's really in steps 2, 3, and 4 that's where Colby comes back into play, because what does Colby do? It helps with team alignment. It allows us to understand how they're going to naturally initiate action or solve problems when it comes to their strategy. And then in step 4, when it comes to building that growth engine through providing accountability and coaching, Audrey is also able to provide, hey, I'm having this problem over here, or I'm struggling with this. And typically, and she's this has happened many times on coaching calls. I'm like, what's their Colby? And so she might send me a direct message in Zoom, or we look at it ahead of time. I even think recently I was doing an on-site with a team, and they just 2 or 3 new team members this year, and we put everything up in the matrix, and it showed them where they had some cognitive cloning and things to be aware of. What would you add to that, Audrey, from a
Yeah,
methodology?
I would say it is that awareness piece and looking at kind of your team as a whole and realizing where everyone is. Because just another example for you and I, James Robert, when I first came back, before I had, a deeper understanding of Colby, I would question a lot of your ideas. He would have ideas and I would do the, well, who, how, where, when. And I got a little self-conscious at one point because I was still kind of new. And I told James Robert, I hope you know that I'm not being negative or like pessimistic, like to your ideas. It's not about that. I'm thinking systems and operations and processes. And because he knew my Colby, he was like, no, I totally get it. So then I felt more empowered, I suppose, to be that, layer of questioning when he would have ideas. So that helps. And I mean, we see that on teams all the time as well. You kind of understand why you behave the way that you do in relation to your teammates, and that it's not personal. You're actually, you're creating value, it's your strength. So I think being able to visualize the team as a whole and kind of realizing some of those things and the way we operate has been really helpful.
Yeah, and learning to value the various strengths or use the other person's strengths to your advantage is really helpful, right? James Robert, you and I, like I mentioned earlier, right? We can come up with all the ideas to solve all the world's problems, but we actually need somebody to rein us in a little bit and be like, hey, well, this is wrong with this one, and something else is wrong with this other idea that we had. Because frankly, they're not all brilliant. Some of them are, but
Yep.
some of them were terrible, right? And so we just gotta you help us to sort through and figure out, all right, which one should we actually go and try to implement.
It's interesting you talk about solving problems and seeing opportunities. I even am right now looking ahead, and I would say a goal is to provide a way for marketing and sales teams within financial brands to integrate the Colby Financial MO Plus into their overall account holder experience through it's a new methodology that we're working on, but I'm calling it banking on coaching, because when I look at financial services, it's commoditized. Everyone's offering the same great rates, amazing service, laundry list of lookalike product features. And I wrote about this in Banking on Digital Growth. It's this idea of providing account holders with clarity into where they've been, where they're at, where they could go next. So there's this whole coaching component. So I'm always looking for the future, and even thinking about the Colby Financial MO Plus, there's a path forward, because if you think about the MO of people working within financial services, within banks, within credit unions, well, they're fact finding, they're following through. So if we could build a system for them that they could then follow through, that's going to increase their confidence going forward, which could increase the confidence of the account holders, which comes all the way back to Audrey, what you're talking about. Confidence. Confidence is key. And I really do believe that confidence is contagious. If you can confidently communicate confidence, that is a very important asset if we're thinking about financial services. If we can deposit confidence into the minds of others, they're going to leave feeling that much bigger, better, brighter when they think about their future.
And James Robert, earlier you mentioned that when you're working with a lot of these senior leadership teams, it's a lot of fact finder, maybe some fact finder follow through. Are you seeing that generally throughout the entire organization? Or are you seeing some differences based on whether it's location or division, job title, that sort of thing?
Audrey, you want to hop in on that, because you have the macro view there of all of the data. I have the kind of the general trends, but you're seeing the day in and the day out of that from your
Yeah.
perspective?
So across the board, generally, the majority is going to be your initiating fact finders, closely followed by your initiating follow throughs. Now, when you're in the marketing and sales department, you might see those initiating quick starts. But what's interesting in the financial industry is a lot of people in other departments, they kind of moved up from, say, teller, frontline into these other departments and leadership roles. So you will have initiating fact finders in marketing and in sales, which traditionally we know we don't typically see, but because they've kind of grown up in the bank, you're going to get that. In fact, we have one marketing team of 7 people that not one of them is an initiating quick start.
So where are they getting the new ideas for how they're going to grow their business?
That's where I tend to come in and
Exactly.
stir the pot a little bit. So I meet with them every 90 days and we go through a process that we review. We call them quarterly health checks. This is where you've been. This is the momentum. This is the progress that you've made. This is where you're at right now. What are the goals? What are the roadblocks? What are the opportunities ahead that you can execute against? And here's what's going on at a macro level. And then we do an annual strat session that goes all the way up to the 30,000 foot view. It's funny you bring them up, Audrey, this one particular organization, because if I think back about the progress that they've made over the past 7 years, it's been another transformational story. But I would say they've journeyed through the four elements for human transformation that I've identified. The very first step is to help people see things from a different perspective. And when they're going through this 90-day growth methodology, that's exactly what they're doing. When one sees different, they begin to think different. Now, I've asked this question, Eric, at over 1,000 times to different financial brand leaders. I say, okay, great. So you're seeing different, you're thinking different. They said, yes. I said, so when you see different and think different, what happens next? Well, they say, well, I'm going to do different. I'm going to act different. I'm going to be different. And then I question, well, are you? How much do you know right now that you need to take action on, but you're failing to take action? And they pause for a little bit and they're like, a lot. And I said, to bridge the gap between thought and action comes down to one thing: it's feeling, it's emotion, and emotion is energy. And the desire, the feeling, the emotion, the energy to do different, to be different, to think different, or to act different has to be greater than the desire to remain the same. And I think that's where this whole coaching aspect comes back into play, because it just provides, for example, this organization who is initiating in fact finding and follow through, but they're resistant on the quick starting side, to have that external perspective to come in respectfully, stir the pot a little bit. It provides them with a way to break free from some of their old perspectives, to provide new perspective, but also to transform their feelings and emotions to a positive place to where they can continue to move forward with courage and confidence.
Yeah, and oftentimes we work with teams, and the ideal team has a pretty healthy mix of strengths, right? Some people here, some people there, but oftentimes based on the work that you do in a highly regulated environment like banking, right? We literally can't take there's certain things we cannot do, right? Or we
Mhm.
have to make sure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so in those situations where, let's say, you're missing a strength, outsource it, right? Find a consultant like yourself to come in, come up with some good ideas. You have a great process for helping them overcome a bit of that risk aversion and getting them comfortable with it and beginning to absorb it and take action with it. So, yeah, you don't have to shake up the team just because you're missing a strength. Just go borrow it from someone else, whether it's internally or externally.
Who, not how.
Absolutely. So, what would you say your best piece of advice is for businesses on why to use Colby?
I would say really to distinguish the difference between the parts of the mind and what sets Colby apart and makes it so unique. We still get a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to personality and Colby measuring personality and not, your natural operating mode. So I would just say spending a lot of time really emphasizing and distinguishing the difference between the parts of the mind really, really helps kind of make this, breakthrough aha moment because we've seen organizations who they've taken the Colby, but it's like the third or fourth, assessment they've taken. So by this time, they're like, okay, it's the same thing, different day. They don't quite take it as seriously. But I think that's kind of on us and on businesses to really emphasize. And one of the ways we do that is we hold a workshop. We have a 3-hour Colby workshop where we'll just dive deep into this. So that's my thoughts. James Robert, did you have anything?
I'd say it comes down to 2 points. Number 1 is clarity. Clarity into who I am and why I operate the way that I do. And it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just who you are. If you're free to be yourself, this is who you are, and I love that framing. And the reason I'm leaning into clarity first is if if you think about the world right now, it is feeling increasingly complex, and there's a lot of chaos. But if we give people the gift of Colby and they begin to know themselves as an individual, see, all transformation that leads to future growth, it starts with the individual. Then it goes to the team. Teams are made up of individuals. When you transform the teams, that's when you begin to transform the organizations. And through the work that we're doing, my belief is when you transform an organization, you can continue to transform the lives of your account holders and then the people who live within the communities that your organization serves. So there's this multiplication effect with that. But it all starts with clarity of why I operate the way I do. The second, though, is when you gain that clarity, it increases respect for yourself, but then respect for those that you're working with and collaborating with, whether that be internally, directly on your team, or externally with external who's, back to your point, Eric. So I even see, there's an opportunity to use Colby as an organization, not just from the internal team, but from those external who's that you closely collaborate with on a day in and day out basis, whether it be technology providers, marketing providers, whoever those external who's might be. It provides clarity, but it also increases respect.
Yeah, and Audrey, you touched on this earlier, right? When you made that career transition, you were actually looking at some of your strengths as weaknesses or deficiencies. And when you can kind of flip the script and look at it as, hey, that whatever I think is a deficiency is actually my superpower, that's when you do gain that confidence and you can start to make those transformations.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I've said this from the beginning. When I first started James Robert, I felt the need to mirror his strengths. I thought I needed to be just like him. And I expressed that to him. And when I got my Colby back and I realized, no, no, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing.
perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And so as we begin to kind of wrap everything up, any parting thoughts from either of you, either on the world at large, how Colby has affected you, where you see your industry going, anything like that? I know that's a really broad question, but it's on purpose.
I am very hopeful about the future of financial services. When we look out at macro market research right now, 85% in the United States feel stressed about money. We go down into particular market segments. For example, the millennial demographic, 8% of them trust financial brands for guidance. What does that mean? 92% of them don't trust financial brands for guidance. So, where are they looking? Interesting enough, they're going to TikTok and they're going to Reddit and they're going to YouTube and they're going to Instagram. I'm looking out towards the future, particularly in this age of AI, where things have the potential to become, more automated. I'm predicting that the individual brand of a leader, of a lender, or an advisor has the potential going forward through platforms like social media to be as influential, if not even more influential than the corporate financial brand. That can feel very exciting for a few who are most likely initiating quick starts. It can feel very terrifying for those who are initiating fact finding and following through. Doesn't mean all hope is lost. It means that there's an opportunity to continue to provide education for those to say, here's what the future could look like. Here are the opportunities. Here are the potential roadblocks to be aware of. And here's a plan. Here's a path that can continue to guide you forward so that you, as a lender, as a leader, as an advisor, can not just offer a product, but really give people help and hope through the content that you're sharing, but the coaching that you can also integrate into your organization that helps to increase the financial confidence of those that you're working to get to a bigger, better, brighter future. That's my hope for financial services looking forward into the future.
Yeah, and as you're talking, that actually sounds like a terrific opportunity, right? If you run XYZ Community Bank, well, you have an opportunity as the CEO or one of the lenders to become that local resource.
Yes.
That one-on-one connection is quite up, right? The CEO of Wells Fargo isn't on TikTok, right? So that is your opportunity to take a little bit of market share from some of those larger players.
Exactly.
Audrey, any words of wisdom you'd like to share with the team?
I would just say this, that, I truly believe that Colby is such a gift, and it is such a gift to know thyself. And, it's been personally very, transformative for me. And I just appreciate being able to continuously share this with those being able to continuously share, and even people in my personal life. So it's just been really fun being part of the Colby community.
Yeah, and we're very appreciative. We love having you guys as a part of the community, as a part of the team. And so I want to thank you, James Robert. Thank you, Audrey, for joining us today. If folks want to learn more about your business, your podcast, anything like that, where should they check you out?
www.digitalgrowth.com, and check out the podcast Banking on Digital Growth, or get the book Banking on Digital Growth on Amazon. And you can find me personally on LinkedIn, James Robert Lay.
Perfect. And yeah, so obviously check out their podcast, go to their website. We talked about Colby for most of the podcast here today. If you've not taken your Colby A yet, make sure you go to Colby.com, click that purple button in the right-hand corner, get your Colby results, because you can see some of the transitions in yourself that these two have seen in themselves and with the teams that they work with. So again, I want to thank both of you for joining us, and to the audience, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. This show is brought to you by Colby Corp, a company that helps leaders and organizations thrive using the only instinctive strengths assessment on the market. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at colby.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.